It all started in 1991 when a little boy was born in Portland, Oregon. And that little boy was me. Now, my mom was 17 years old when she had me, and unfortunately, my birth father never stuck around to even meet me. Now, my mom was super young, so that forced her to drop out of school, work full-time, and she finally got her GED later on. We lived with my grandpa and my uncle in a house in Portland for the first couple years I was around, and my mom's main focus was just to make ends meet. I remember hanging out with my uncle and grandfather a lot since my mom worked so much. I had this brown football-shaped toy box that I would shoot a basketball into, and I loved my yellow and orange Flintstones type car. I was a quick learner, and I was way ahead of other kids my age. I started walking and talking before most kids, but for some reason, I couldn't grow any hair. I was bald until I was about 4 years old, and the doctors really had no explanation. They just told my mom to keep massaging my head with shampoo, and lo and behold, my hair finally grew. Anyway, after a couple of years, my mom and I ended up moving out of my grandfather's house, and we got our own apartment. Now, this is where things get a little fuzzy, and I can't remember much until a few years later when my mom met a man who I guess we'll call Daniel. Daniel ended up asking my mom to marry him, and one thing really stands out from their wedding in my memory, and that's when I made a complete fool of myself. I was the ring bearer, and when I was walking down the aisle, I had my eyes covered with a pillow because I was super shy. Well, I ended up tripping on a step and face planting in front of everyone at the wedding. Everyone laughed, and Daniel came over and picked me up. He dusted me off and made sure I was okay. So after the wedding, Daniel, my mom, and I, we all moved into a house in a small city called St. Helens in Oregon. We had 2 dogs, one named Junior and one named Aslan. I was still too young for school, so we ended up spending the next few years kind of bouncing from house to house while my parents bounced from job to job. Now, I really want to explain the relationship I have with Daniel. It's an odd one, and it's kind of complicated, but I think you guys will understand if I give you a little bit of a background. So Daniel came into my life when I was really young, too young to really understand what was going on. I never really knew why my real dad wasn't around, and I was too young to even question it at that point. But Daniel was there, and he took on the role of my father. He took care of me, he loved me, he raised me, and he treated me like his son, and he even called me his son. He's the only real father figure I've ever had, and while he may not be my biological father, he's 100% my dad, and will always be. When I was about 5 or 6, my dad got a new job working on diesel engines for a trucking company, and we ended up moving again. This time, we moved to Vancouver, Washington, where we lived on a super busy road. And I could never really explore outside or do anything because my parents didn't feel the city was a safe place for a kid my age. I ended up spending a lot of time inside, and this is when I found my love for video games. I had been given a regular Nintendo at the time, and I found a bunch of these old games at a garage sale. My favorite was Castlevania, but man, it was so damn hard. I couldn't get very far into it. I was terrible at it. One Christmas, my dad handed me a box, and inside was a piece of toilet paper. He'd always joked around like, hey, you're gonna get toilet paper for Christmas. You keep acting up, you know, just being a goofball. And this time I thought he really had given me toilet paper. I thought that's what I got for Christmas, but I looked underneath and there it was. It was a Nintendo 64. My first game was Mario 64, and I'm pretty sure I played that game every single day for the next year. I bet my dad regretted giving me that gift. So I started elementary school and never really had any issues making friends. I always did well in school, and I was fairly good at every sport I played. And a short time later, my baby sister was born. We stayed in that house for a couple more years, and after I finished up 2nd grade, we ended up moving again. We moved to a city called Woodland, Washington, which was about 40 minutes north of Vancouver, but it was just far enough that I never got to see any of my friends, and I had to make new ones. Again, making friends wasn't too hard, and I got back into the swing of things in this new city. The city was a lot smaller, and our house was pretty far in the country, so I really had no friends to hang out with outside of school. So I spent a lot of time playing video games again. I balanced school, sports, video games, and just normal kid life for a couple years until it all turned downhill. Just before 6th grade, my parents started having issues, and they ended up getting a divorce. Around the same time, my dog Aslan ended up passing away, and our dog Junior started acting really funny. A couple days later, Junior had a heart attack, and we had to put him down. Everything going on put some serious stress on me, and because I felt like I was one of the big reasons my parents were splitting up, and I didn't understand why all this stuff was happening at once. My mom ended up moving us back to Vancouver so that she could be closer to her work and so we could get into a decent apartment. So there I was again, a new city, a new home, and a new school. Unfortunately, I went to a school that I didn't have a lot of my older friends that I knew from Vancouver previously, so I had to find new ones all over again. I met new people, I started playing sports again, but in school I was having some serious issues. I still got decent grades and did most of my homework, but I started acting out and kind of taking on this class clown persona. I was always trying to do something silly to make others laugh, and it ended up getting me into a lot of trouble. I had more detentions and in-school suspensions than I can even count. And I always remember my friend Zach and I, we actually record these little skits using this old camera that my parents had. They were like Saturday Night Live skits, but for kids our age, they had really raunchy humor for whatever reason. Looking back at the videos, they're awful, but at the time, we thought we were the funniest guys around. We wanted nothing more than to be the biggest comedic duo in existence. And I guess that kind of played out in the future. So I continued getting into trouble, and my parents were pretty fed up with it. So just before 8th grade, my mom moved my sister and I again, this time to a really tiny town called Camas, Washington. The move was to put me in a better school system so that I would meet better people who wouldn't have such a negative influence on me. To some degree, it kind of worked. It ended up being the best thing for me in the long run. So we moved to Camas, and I started up at a new school, and it was time to meet new people once again. This time didn't really work out like before. The only people I was really friends with were all my teammates from sports. I was really intimidated by this new school because a lot of the people going there, their families were extremely wealthy, and I was worried I was going to be looked down upon just because of my family's current financial situation. It was around this time that I really started focusing on school, sports, and video games. I didn't have much of a social life, so I went the extra mile and made sure that everything else was a priority. That's when I decided that baseball was a serious passion of mine, and I wanted to take it as far as I could. I put hours and hours into practicing in my free time and played on multiple teams at once. In the summer, just before I entered high school, my baseball team ended up winning the state tournament, and we got to represent the entire state of Washington in regionals. Only 3 wins away from the Little League World Series, and we ended up losing to Hawaii. One of the best summers of my life, and one I'll never forget. My freshman year of high school was a pretty normal one. I played basketball, baseball, went to school, did my homework, hung out with my friends here and there, played some video games. Pretty normal for a kid that age. Unfortunately, again, things took a turn. I ended up becoming more and more distant from my family and never wanted to be around them or talk to them, just normal teenager stuff, I guess. It killed my relationship with my dad, who I barely got to see anyway, since he only got to see my sister and I every other weekend. We ended up getting into some fights and I stopped talking to him altogether. Sophomore year came along and I started going through the motions, basically. But this year ended up being a lot different than anything before. For Christmas, I ended up getting an Xbox 360 and my first game, Gears of War. I had never played a shooter online before. It was completely different. I had played GoldenEye and Medal of Honor and stuff against my friends in the same room, but nothing like this. I couldn't believe just how awesome this game was. I got hooked. Like literally addicted. I'm not even joking. I would stay awake until 2 a.m. and wake up early before school just to play before I left. I would come home, ignore my homework, friends, girlfriend, just to play this game. I couldn't stop, and it was a drug. Because of my insane addiction, I stopped caring about everything else. Basketball season rolled around, and I didn't even try out for the team. All I could think about was how it would take time away from video games, and how I didn't want that. So this continued until the spring when baseball season arrived. I was still very serious about baseball, and I decided that I needed to stop playing so many video games so that I could get my grades to a decent enough level to play baseball. My parents were hassling me, my teachers hassled me, my friends hassled me, everyone wanted me to play baseball, and so I did. I made the change, I started playing baseball again, focusing on school, and everything was picking back up. But one day, during practice, I was playing center field, and there was a long hit to the gap. I rushed over, grabbed the ball, threw it in. As I threw, my arm gave, and I felt the worst pain I've ever experienced in my shoulder. My rotator cuff was done. I had severely strained it, and I instantly knew this is the worst possible injury for me. I ended up going to physical therapy, I think like twice a week, but no matter what, my arm never felt the same. so I stopped going. This is when I got really depressed and I literally stopped caring about anything and everything that wasn't video games. I locked myself in my room every day and just played Xbox. I never hung out with my friends, I never played another sport, I hadn't talked to my dad in a good 6 months, I never did homework, and I didn't care how badly I did in school. Nothing mattered anymore. I was so depressed that I couldn't play baseball and then my arm was injured, but I never did anything to change it. Instead of fixing it and rehabilitating my arm, I just sat around and played video games. Something I regret so much to this day. So there I was, nearly 17 years old, bad grades, depressed, addicted to video games, ignoring my family, ignoring my friends, no hope, and I just didn't care about anything or anyone, and I only had myself to blame. Then one day I was surfing the internet on this little site called YouTube and found some videos on Gears of War. I ended up finding this guy called Angel of Evil. He made montages and showed off all his best clips. I remember telling myself I could easily do that, and so I tried. I ended up buying an adaptive game bridge for $20 on eBay so that I could record my gameplay, and man, I was so excited to get this little piece of plastic in the mail. I started recording constantly, every day, getting clips after clips after clips, and then I decided I had enough for a video, so I started researching all these editing programs. I found one called Sony Vegas. I wanted to find out how to use it, so I watched tutorial after tutorial, hours and hours of learning just to do simple things. But finally, I learned enough to put it in use, and I had created my very first Gears of War montage. It had some shitty Linkin Park songs in it and some shitty transitions, but damn was I proud. I was so happy to have created something entirely from scratch, and I suddenly had a really big passion for something again. I had created this account called the GoldGlove07, GoldGlove being an award in baseball, and 2007 was the year at the time. Then I uploaded my very first video the next day. I started recording and editing and making videos more and more, starting out with maybe 1 to 2 a month, and before I knew it, they were getting views. People had somehow found these montages and seemed to like them. People thought I was a good player and that I'd made entertaining videos, and about a year later, I had racked up a small little viewer base. It was about 5,000 viewers strong, but at the time, that was huge. I couldn't believe that so many people wanted to watch my videos. Now, during this year, everything else in my life had gone down the shitter. I failed 3 classes my junior year of high school. I would skip out on spending time with my girlfriend so that I could record for my montage. No, that is not a joke. I never spent time with my family. I never even attempted to play a sport again. The only thing that mattered to me was YouTube. It was the only thing I felt I had going for me, and it was the only thing that made me truly happy. I kept up this routine for about another year. My channel was still my main focus, but I started finally getting out of my depression a little bit. I started hanging out with friends a lot more. I met a new girl and started dating her. I ended up talking to my dad again and we fixed our issues. And I was doing a lot better in school. Still no sports, but I really didn't care. Video making was my new passion and I wanted nothing more than to succeed in it. I graduated high school on time and I really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I decided that I would attend a community college close to home so that I would be close to my girlfriend and so that I would have some more time to decide what I wanted to do before spending money on a larger university. 6 months later, I had no job, I was living at home, I very rarely went to class, and all I did was play video games. My girlfriend and my family got really frustrated with me because they believed I was just wasting my time. At the time, even I kind of thought what they were saying was true, but I still didn't want to give up video making. Gears of War had faded, so I started posting Call of Duty commentaries and so did the others around me. I remember the original greats, XCal, Blame Truth, Hutch, Nanners. My channel started growing a bit again and I was starting to see some real success. I had just accumulated around 40,000 subscribers, became a machinima director, and had just received word that I would be a machinima partner in the next month or so. The next day, my channel was gone. I had been hit with a copyright strike for music that I had used in a montage. It was my 3rd strike, and no matter how hard Machinima tried to get it back, it was lost. Around the same time, my girlfriend and I ended up breaking up, and I was pretty upset over it, so losing my channel too was a big hit. I was officially depressed once again. I ended up starting a new channel that you're on right now, GoldGloveTV. It was originally going to be a vlog channel, but since I already had a few viewers on it, I thought I'd go ahead and use it full time and make it my new main channel. I started right back where I left off. Machinima was kind enough to partner it and keep me as a director, and I started earning money from my videos. Not much at first. My parents still thought it was a scam, that I should be focusing 100% on school, but I was determined to change their minds. Because I missed class so much, I was put on financial aid suspension. I couldn't afford to take classes anymore. My parents were so furious, they had no idea what to do with me. But fortunately, a couple weeks later, I received my first decent paycheck from YouTube and showed it to my parents. They were on board with the idea of me doing YouTube full-time and pursuing it. I convinced them that school would always be there for me, but this specific opportunity may only be here for a limited time. I was going to take full advantage of this and use it to really focus on building my channel. I ended up moving out of my mom's house and getting an apartment with a friend for about a year. My channel continued to grow and then kind of hit a plateau. No growth, very little views. I was making less than minimum wage. I was able to save just enough money that I ended up deciding to move to Los Angeles to live in a house with 2 other YouTubers, Jericho and T Martin. We planned on creating Gamer Shore, a combined channel with skits, parodies, music videos, and anything we really wanted to make. I packed up everything I owned in my little car and drove from Camas, Washington, all the way down to Los Angeles, California. It was terrifying. It was the furthest I've ever lived from home. I knew no one. I had no idea if I had just made the dumbest mistake of my life or not. We all were so dedicated to our own personal channels that we never did find or make the time to begin Gamer Shore, and our original plan was a huge bust. While this was all happening, I realized that the LA life was just not for me. I don't like busy cities, I don't like crowded streets, I don't like driving in the car for an hour to go 5 miles, and I really miss the Washington rain. T Martin moved back home, Muzzafuzza moved in, Pro Syndicate moved in. We had a fun house, but outside of that house, I just wasn't feeling it. Now, fast forward about 8 months, and I am back in Washington. My channel has grown to a point that I thought was never possible. I'm with a beautiful woman who I thought I would never have a chance with. My story isn't one full of crazy adversity, me overcoming a death in my family, or anything spectacular. It's just how one normal kid did normal kid stuff and how for some reason, it turned out for him. I love what I do, and I love making you guys kick-ass videos. Thank you all so much for the support, and thank you for 500,000 subscribers. I probably don't deserve what I have, but I appreciate it more than you'll ever know. I love your butts.